Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching Trains Per Network. Enjoy the trains, West Central.
Look at that! Aha! Welcome back, 400! Welcome back!
Yo, what's up, everybody? ELS, and welcome everybody to a new railroad history video. And folks, we are talking about today the history of the Canadian National Railroad. So let's talk about it, folks. Canadian National Railway was created in 1919. Was created by the federal government to obligate several bankrupt privately owned railroads such as Canadian Northern, the Grand Trunk, and the National Transcontinental into a single state-owned crown company. And let's talk about it. We'll go through like kind of the phases. Let's go back to the forming, facing the collapse of modern railroads during World War I. The Canadian government improvised. The Canadian Northern Railroad was taken over in 1970 following the Grand Trunk Pacific and others. They were merged together to create the Canadian Railway, the Canadian National Railway System by 1923. Originally created to stabilize the rail network, Canadian National has become a massive entity, aka called the People's Railway, which opened up in the northern Great British Columbia and the Plains. This was a primary competitor to Canadian Pacific. Now, obviously, folks, they were passenger trains, but now they're more focused on freight, which that happened around 1978, where they transferred their passenger operations to Via Rail. And now here in 1995, the Canadian government sold the Canadian National to private investors via an IPO. Following that, the company has successfully increased efficiency and expanded its network, notably acquiring the Illinois Central Railroad in 1999, making it the mega north-south transcontinental network stretching from Canada to the Gulf of Mexico. And such talking about that, we can talk about some of the ones they've taken over. Like, for example, they've gone into the BC Rails, Scavenge, Ontario, Rail America. In the U.S., for us, it's the Great Lakes Transportation, Wisconsin Central, the U.S. Steel, obviously the Illinois Central, Great Lakes Transportation, the Quebec Rail Company. Obviously we talk about the Grand Trunk. Let's talk about the Grand Trunk Western, the U.S. property of Grand Trunk, incorporated by Canadian National in 1982 as Grand Trunk Western to Grand Trunk Corp in 1971. The U.S. operations integrated into Canadian National 1996. The Chicago and Toledo Shoreline jointly owned the Grand Trunk Rail, the GTW, and the Nickel Plate Railway, NKP, to the Norfolk and Southern in 1964. Then Grand Trunk Western bought the NWR, N&W interest in 1981. The Detroit, Toledo, and Ironton was sold off to Henry Ford sold by Henry Ford to Penrail Corp in 1964. But yeah, that's one of the big ones. And obviously, for me being where I'm at, obviously the line that I'm used to be owned by Wisconsin Central. We're going to talk about actually in the upcoming history one. Canadian National took over Wisconsin Central in 2004. I'll go over the dates. BC Rail was taken over by Canadian National in 2004. Scavenge, Ontario, 2006. Canadian National took over it. Rail America was taken over by Canadian National in 2006. Another one that I don't know how to really say it was taken over in 2007. Great Lakes Transportation was taken over by Canadian National in 2004. Wisconsin took it over in 2001. U.S. Steel was taken over by Canadian National in 2009. The Illinois Central, obviously 1999, as we've discussed. Great Lakes Transportation was taken over by Canadian National in 2004. And the Quebec Rail Company was taken over by Canadian National in 2008. But obviously, we discussed here, Canadian National is well known around in the U.S. here. And, I think we have to admit that. How much they took over, they are one of, if not, the biggest area. And, this is from 2012, the statistic here. They operated 20,600 miles, that time they had 1,965 locomotives and 36,937 rail cars. So there's so much with this that Canadian National now, as we speak of it, is one of the bigger railroads here in the U.S. and in Canada, along with Canadian Pacific. So I think there's always a lot to talk about with the Canadian National Railroad. But that's it, guys. Thank you so much. If you did enjoy this, please hit the like and subscribe. We are working on returning the history content. We are going to be doing a lot about the history of railroads, the plan is here. And we got a bunch, such as we're going to talk about the Chicago and Northwestern Railroad, the Milwaukee Road, Fox River Valley Railroad, the Green Bay and Western, Lake Superior and Ishlaming, the Soo Line, and Wisconsin Central we talk about. So stay tuned. The next one you guys will be seeing will be the Chicago and Northwestern Road. So until that, guys, have a good rest of your day and peace out.